You wake up tired, not because your body is exhausted, but because your mind never gets a moment of silence anymore. Before your feet even touch the floor, your phone is already controlling your emotions. Notifications, messages, headlines, opinions. Someone showing off success. Someone pretending to be happy. Someone trying to provoke strangers online just to feel alive for 5 seconds. And without realizing it, your nervous system enters a war before your day even begins. Here's the disturbing part nobody talks about. Modern society does not reward peace. It rewards reaction. The louder you react, the more visible you become. The more emotional you are, the easier you are to manipulate. The more you explain yourself, the more power people gain over you. And maybe that's why so many people today feel mentally drained without understanding why. Because they are constantly performing. Performing confidence. Performing happiness. Performing outrage. Performing importance. But deep down, most people are exhausted from trying to be seen. And tonight, I want to talk about the quiet escape from all of it. Not motivation. Not fake positivity. Not grind harder advice. Something much more dangerous. Silence. Because in this world, silence is no longer normal. It has become threatening. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the people who speak the least often control the most. You'll understand why emotionally calm people intimidate unstable people. And most importantly, you'll understand the hidden psychological trap modern society uses to keep people distracted, reactive, emotionally weak, and easy to control. Because the truth is, the moment you stop reacting to everything, you become difficult to manipulate. And society hates people like that. Welcome to Silent Authority. Let me tell you something I realized a few years ago. The older I got, the less I trusted noise. Especially modern noise. Social media noise. Political noise. Relationship drama. Endless opinions. Endless outrage. Endless people trying to convince strangers that they matter. At first, I thought I was becoming antisocial. But eventually I realized something darker. Most people are not communicating anymore. They are competing for psychological dominance. Every conversation has hidden tension now. Who sounds smarter? Who sounds more successful? Who gets offended first? Who controls the emotional direction of the interaction? Even friendships started feeling performative. You meet someone for coffee, and within 10 minutes they're subtly advertising their lifestyle to you. Their money. Their vacations. Their relationship. Their growth. And if you pay close attention, you realize many people don't speak to connect anymore. They speak to manage perception. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. People rarely show you who they are. They show you what gives them leverage. That's why modern society feels emotionally exhausting. Because almost every environment is psychologically loud. And most people never escape it long enough to hear themselves think. That's where self-control begins. Not in motivation videos. Not in productivity hacks. But in silence. Real silence. The kind that forces you to sit alone with your own mind. And that's exactly why most people avoid it. Because silence exposes things distraction was hiding. Your anxiety. Your loneliness. Your insecurity. Your unresolved anger. Your fear of being insignificant. That's why people scroll endlessly. Not because they're entertained. Because silence makes them confront themselves. Marcus Aurelius understood this long before smartphones existed. He ruled an empire surrounded by betrayal, politics, war, manipulation, yet he constantly withdrew into solitude to observe his own thoughts. Not because he hated people. Because he understood something terrifying. A man who cannot sit alone with his own mind, will eventually become controlled by the minds of others. Look around today. Most people cannot survive 5 minutes without stimulation. Music in their ears. Videos in the background. Constant texting. Constant updates. Constant emotional consumption. And slowly, their attention fractures. This is why modern people feel spiritually weak. Their mind never fully belongs to them anymore. And once attention is stolen repeatedly, identity starts dissolving too. That's why so many people today don't even know what they truly think. Their opinions are borrowed. Their emotions are borrowed. Their outrage is borrowed. They absorb the emotional climate around them like psychological sponges. One negative comment ruins their day. One online argument consumes their energy. One rejection destroys their confidence. Not because they are weak people. Because they never learned emotional separation. The Stoics called this slavery to external forces. And today, it has become normalized. You can see it everywhere. Someone posts a photo not because they enjoy the moment, but because they need validation from strangers. Someone argues online for hours not because they care about truth, but because losing emotionally feels unbearable. Someone constantly explains themselves because they're terrified of being misunderstood. But here's the painful truth. The more you need people to understand you, the more control they gain over your emotional state. That realization changes you. Because eventually you start noticing something strange. The strongest people you meet are usually quiet. Not weak quiet. Controlled quiet. They don't rush to defend themselves. They don't chase approval. They don't emotionally leak every thought in their head. And because of that, people project power onto them. Silence creates mystery. Mystery creates psychological space. And psychological space creates authority. That's why emotionally reactive people fear calm people. Because calm people are difficult to read. And what cannot be easily read, cannot be easily controlled. I learned this the hard way. Years ago, someone insulted me publicly during a group conversation. Old version of me would have reacted instantly. Defended myself. Explained myself. Tried to regain social control. But that day, I stayed quiet. Not because I was scared. Because for the first time, I noticed something deeper. The person provoking me wasn't searching for truth. They were searching for emotional access. They wanted my reaction. And the moment I understood that, everything changed. I watched them become uncomfortable. They kept talking. Kept escalating. Kept trying to force emotional engagement. And suddenly I realized. Most people lose power because they react too quickly. Reaction is exposure. The moment someone can predict your emotional response, they can influence your behavior. That's why emotional self-control feels almost supernatural today. Because modern society conditions impulsiveness. Immediate opinions. Immediate outrage. Immediate emotional broadcasting. Nobody pauses anymore. And because nobody pauses, almost nobody truly observes. But observation is where real intelligence begins. The samurai understood this. Ancient warriors were trained to remain emotionally still under pressure because emotional chaos clouds perception. A reactive fighter dies quickly. And honestly, modern life is not that different. The workplace is psychological warfare. Social media is psychological warfare. Modern dating is psychological warfare. Everyone is trying to influence everyone emotionally. That's why calmness has become rare. And rare things become powerful. Bruce Lee once said, "Be like water." Most people misunderstand that quote. They think it means being peaceful. No. It means adaptability without emotional rigidity. Water does not panic. It does not argue. It does not explain itself. It simply moves with force when necessary. That is real emotional control. And once you experience it, you stop fearing silence. You start protecting it. Because silence sharpens perception. You begin noticing manipulation faster. You notice who only contacts you when they need validation. You notice who subtly competes with you in conversation. You notice how some people become uncomfortable when they cannot emotionally influence you. And honestly, that's when your relationships begin changing. Some people disappear. At first, that hurts. But eventually you realize something important. Not everyone loved your presence. Some people only loved your emotional accessibility. They loved how easily they could affect you. Your reactions entertained them. Your insecurity reassured them. Your explanations gave them leverage. But once you become emotionally disciplined, those dynamics collapse. And suddenly, silence cleans your life. This is where many people misunderstand Stoicism. Stoicism is not emotional numbness. It's emotional sovereignty. Feeling emotions without becoming enslaved by them. That's why emotionally mature people move differently. They don't need to win every argument. They don't need the final word. They don't need constant recognition. Because their identity no longer depends on external approval. And once that happens, you become dangerous in a very quiet way. Not aggressive. Not loud. Just internally unshakable. People can feel that energy immediately. You've probably met someone like this before. A person who speaks calmly. Moves slowly. Never overshares. Never forces attention. Yet somehow, everyone in the room feels their presence. That is quiet authority. And modern society is terrified of people who develop it. Because consumer culture survives on emotional instability. Think about it. If people became emotionally disciplined, half the internet would collapse overnight. Advertising works by creating insecurity. Outrage media works by triggering anger. Algorithms work by rewarding impulsive reactions. The system profits from emotional chaos. Calm people are difficult to monetize. That's why distraction is everywhere now. Not accidentally. Systemically. A distracted person is easier to influence. A reactive person is easier to predict. An emotionally unstable person is easier to sell to. But when you focus on yourself, everything changes. You stop explaining your vision to people who secretly want you to fail. You stop announcing every goal online for temporary validation. You stop reacting to bait. And slowly, your energy returns. Your focus returns. Your intuition returns. You start waking up without psychological noise poisoning your mind. And something strange begins happening. You become harder to manipulate emotionally. Criticism no longer destroys your peace. Praise no longer controls your identity. Rejection no longer defines your value. You become steady. And in modern society, steadiness feels almost rebellious. But let me be honest with you. This path is lonely sometimes. Because when you stop participating in emotional chaos, many people stop understanding you. They think you changed. And maybe you did. You stopped needing constant stimulation. You stopped needing everyone to agree with you. You stopped needing to prove your worth every day. And that threatens people who still depend on external validation to feel important. But eventually you realize peace is worth more than social approval. You realize most arguments were never worth your nervous system. Most explanations were never necessary. Most reactions only drained your energy. So you become more selective. Selective with your words. Selective with your attention. Selective with your emotional investment. And that's when life becomes clearer. Not easier. Clearer. You start seeing who genuinely respects you. You start seeing which environments destroy your peace. You start seeing how much suffering comes from unconscious emotional reactions. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself. Not master of other people. Not master of status. Not master of perception. Master of himself." And honestly, that may be the rarest thing left in modern society. A person who owns their own attention, owns their own emotions, owns their own mind. Because once your mind belongs to you again, the world loses much of its power over you. And maybe that's the real meaning of silence. Not isolation. Not weakness. Freedom. Freedom from constant emotional intrusion. Freedom from endless psychological noise. Freedom from needing the world's permission to feel worthy. So tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself something honestly. How much of your exhaustion comes from life itself? And how much comes from reacting to things that never deserved your energy in the first place? How much peace have you sacrificed trying to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you? How much attention have you given to noise, while neglecting your own mind? Because the moment you stop feeding every distraction, you begin reclaiming yourself. And that journey changes everything. Not loudly. Quietly. Like all real power does. If this video spoke to something you've been feeling lately, stay with that feeling. And if you've experienced moments where silence protected your peace more than words ever could, I'd genuinely like to hear your experience in the comments. Subscribe to Silent Authority if you're tired of motivational noise and want deeper conversations about emotional control, modern psychological manipulation, stoicism, and quiet power. And remember this. The people who control themselves eventually become impossible for the world to control.